Well, let's take a look at the weather situation here for the week ahead. Are we going to have some planting windows in the U.S. or not? We're going to talk about that and much more. Weather around the world. Joining us now for a conversation, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, good to catch up with you again this week. And, you know, planting windows have been a little tough to come by for some folks here in the last few weeks, just with the active weather pattern, a lot of severe weather. And it sounds like we saw some more here over the weekend and have more potential this week ahead, don't we?
Yeah, I think we have another 4 days, including today, for the risk of strong to severe storms. Most of it's going to be in the central U.S. It'll get over into the Corn Belt and then stay primarily, though, in the in other words, not southeast, not east coast. It's all right here, and that tells you where the pattern's been most active and where it's probably going to stay active. Yesterday on Sunday, man, the storms in Kansas were absolutely enormous. It was amazing to watch. There was one storm in central Kansas that blew up into a long squat. I mean, it was tiny little storm that fit inside of a county. By the end of the night and the overnight, it would stretched across almost all of eastern Kansas. And this morning, it's all the way in eastern Iowa. I mean, it's just amazing how one storm system has the ability to do that. But these storms yesterday dropped a lot of hail. And it's just, again, the setup this week for a lot of heavy rain, tight, I mean, non existent planting windows for some people, and potential for 1 to 3 inches of rain across a lot of the Corn Belt, upper Midwest, northern plains, while we have a frost event hitting like the Northwest this morning in Spokane, Washington. They have a frost risk out for them. So this is that's what happens. You get cold in the Northwest and you open the Gulf of Mexico, it just stays active, and that's where we've been.
Well, thinking about you mentioned a few days here of an active pattern. I mean, who's gonna maybe have a shot at a planting window this week ahead? I mean, what are we realistically looking like as we head towards the holiday weekend and to the end of the month of May, Eric?
Yeah, I don't see the pattern shifting at all before we get to the very end of May. So you said who's going to have a planting window, and my head was like, is anybody going to have a plant? I don't. I
Mhm.
don't think. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, this entire region, you're going to get after it. I think it's just going to be the trouble with the places that have been delayed continuing to be delayed. And
Okay.
this is a north-south problem. I mean, it's the whole country. You go down to eastern Texas, we've got places there that have seen 10 times the normal rainfall in the last 30 days. You go across the whole of the Gulf Coast into the south, extremely wet conditions. We've broken away from the drought that was in the Carolinas. The U.S. Drought Monitor is now down to 13% of the land area in some form of drought, D1 to D4. And where that drought is this primarily in the southwest and the northern Rockies, which, by the way, the northern Rockies might get some snow out of this pattern. The Canadian prairie has been wet. And even though central Kansas has struggled so much with drought early, yesterday's storms went ripping through there, meaning that it can rain over these drought areas. It's just not enough to break any sort of the longer term stress. So if you can tell that I'm like rattling off thing after thing after thing, that's where the pattern's been. And I need it to shift a bit. I don't want it to break to where we just put in a massive ridge of heat in the midsection of the country, but I'd love to get away from daily storm systems.
Well, we'll be keeping our eyes on this. I know a lot of farmers seeing a little bit of a challenge in terms of finishing off this crop here, and they've been doing their best to maximize the small planting windows they may or may not have had. So,
Mhm.
sounds like more of that to continue here through the end of the month. Let's turn our attention to South America as we continue to watch the flooding in Rio Grande do Sul. It's been dry in Safrita areas of Brazil as well, although maybe getting some rainfall over the weekend. Talk about the latest you're seeing in South America, Eric.
Yeah, we did sneak some rain into the forecast for like Paraná, Mato Grosso do Sul. This, of course, where we have some safrina acres. Rio Grande do Sul does not, have those safrina acres, but they've had just, as you know, a tremendous amount of flooding. The story going forward is more rain for that area that's been flooding. Plus, we've got the risk of really cold air coming up from Argentina into southern parts of southern Brazil, Paraguay, even over toward Bolivia. So they're going to go cold in that part of South America. But overall, I think the main story is just going to be how much damage has been done to this crop in southern Brazil. So we're going to watch that.
Now let's go over to Russia. There's a lot of chatter about what has been happening in their wheat growing areas, everything from frost to heat, etc. What's the latest you're hearing there, Eric?
I think the thing that we need to talk about is the dryness. The models keep kind of whiffing on how much rainfall they want to put into some key areas in the Russian wheat belt, and the rains just don't come in. This also includes some of Ukraine. Ukraine is drier in the next 10 days as well. So that's going to have to continue to be a story that evolves that we have to watch carefully while we're trying to just hope that we get heat in and keep heat around for this crop that's going to go in late here in the Midwest. And by the way, just something to think about coming back to the US. If we, let's say we don't plant big portions of Iowa until the first week of June, and there's guys out there that have told me that they may be planting the first week of June. On average, north to south in Iowa from June 1st to October 15th. We get in the north about 2,200, 2,300 GDDs from June 7th to October 15th, and in the south about 2,600. I don't know if that's really yet to be a discussion about changing RM, but some folks might be having that discussion here pretty soon.
Well, and that's a good point there that I think a lot of folks, once that calendar starts flipping to June, the agronomic side, I'm no expert, but you get to a certain point, and if you're behind, you gotta make a lot of tough calls, and you gotta make some changes on the fly in terms of what you're putting into the ground typically, don't you, Eric?
Yeah, and then you just have to start hoping that there's no early frost, like that it's in
Mhm.
November. And to be honest, that's actually more common than you think that we don't get a first frost until late. But the rate at which you stop accumulating those heat units once you get past the end of September, it slows down a lot. So we have to have a good
Mhm.
long finish on the crop in order to ensure its success. But we'll get there. We'll worry about that problem when it arises.
I should ask just real quick to wrap up, any updates to any longer range model forecasts we get into June, July, or I know some of those time windows, it's tough for us to forecast that far out, obviously, but we always like to take a look. Anything new on the horizon, Eric?
Yeah, we do have all of the models finally in, and they want to put a big southwest ridge in the United States. They want to keep the West really hot and give us a hot, stormy summer across the Midwest. And given how wet it's been, okay, we either have to stay with it or because going over hot and dry would not be good either. So that's the latest story on that. And the ocean temperatures continue to push that. And by the way, today, right in the middle of the equatorial Pacific, the average ocean temperature anomaly is 0 degrees Celsius, which means it is perfectly neutral right now in the middle of the Pacific. And we're going to be transitioning toward weak La Nina with time here. So that is the narrative globally. I think if there's risk, it is west this year with respect to heat and large scale dryness. We'll see.
We will see. Well, I know folks can find weather information that you have available every day, agweather.com, ag-wx.com for more information. Eric, before we wrap up real quick, anything final you want to share or reiterate to folks here today?
You know, Levi Cowan, many of you probably don't know who this guy is, but he is the world leading expert on hurricanes, in my opinion, forecasting them. He just released his brand new forecast for this upcoming hurricane season. I have not watched it. It came out last night while I was watching storms in Kansas. But if you go to tropicaltidbits.com, that's the name of his website, tropicaltidbits.com, you'll get one of the world's leading experts on hurricanes giving you their forecast for the season, which could be really great. I'll watch it here after we're done. So something else to keep note of.
Yeah, go check that out. And again, agweather.com, ag-wx.com for more with Eric Snodgrass from Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, always good to talk with you, sir. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again soon.
That sounds good. See you, Jesse.